Hey everybody, it's Mark again, and I'm going to do something a little bit different with this video, and it might make a lot of people upset. However, it might open a lot of people's eyes. I have to first start off by saying, when I was in the military and going to my second duty station, I stayed with a friend in Ohio, and he gave me a couple books. One was a book on how to play pool, billiards. Another was a book written by Harry S. Lorayne. Harry S. Lorayne was a famous entertainer back in the 50s and 60s, and he wrote a couple books, but one book was how to develop a super powerful memory. And he wrote another memory book and probably some more. And you can purchase this book off of eBay, and I will leave a link in the description of this video where you can purchase it. It costs like $7 for paperback, brand new copy. But in the book, he said, before you can remember, and y'all heard me talk about this before, but in the book, he says, before you can remember what you're reading or what somebody is saying to you, you have to pay attention. And so if, let's say, for example, you and your spouse are talking and she asks you a question and you don't know the answer to the question from the conversation that you two were having, it's because you weren't paying attention to her. So you have to pay attention. And the reason I mention this book is because I grew up going to church with my grandmother. My dad hardly ever went to church. He would get mad at certain things, but my grandma always took me to church when I lived in Ohio, and I would go to church with her every Sunday and every Wednesday, and along with my uncle. But growing up, you're taught certain things, and so when you go to read the Bible and you get to reading about certain subjects, you recall what you're taught, and so you're not paying attention to what you're reading, and you basically skim over it without reading it and paying attention. When I study, I rarely go to church. When I study with Shepherds Chappel. Arnold Murray, who's passed away, and Dennis Murray, who I haven't studied with him in a while, but one of my YouTube subscribers told me that he has health issues and he may not even be alive right now. But I will leave a link to their YouTube channel, and they teach the Bible chapter by chapter and verse by verse. And my mom got me into studying with the Shepherds Chappel. And believe me, when I first started studying, I got mad because they were talking about stuff that completely different from when I was growing up. And so let's get into it. I'm going to go over two subjects. One is the Ten Commandments. And most people believe that Moses, the tablets that Moses brought down to the people were written by the hand of God. Well, that's not true. And I'm going to prove it to you right now. So let's get started. Now, I have two Bibles right here. This Bible right here is worn out. And it was produced by Dr. Jerry Powell, which is a Pentecostal preacher, I believe. But we'll talk about this Bible more later. And I have another Bible, and they're both King James Version Bibles. And I've got other Bibles in my house, but this Bible is what I read all the time because it's in my bathroom, and when I'm doing my business, I read this Bible. Exodus chapter 20. it talks about the 10 Commandments. And then chapter 31, it talks about the commandments, and then it talks about judgments and a bunch of other stuff. But in chapter 31 is where I want to get to. Chapter 31, verse 18. And he gave unto Moses, when he had made an end of communing with him upon Mount Sinai, 2 tablets of testimony, tablets of stone, written in the finger of God. Okay, but later, as Moses came off the mountain, he saw that the people were, his brother Aaron was making gods out of jewelry, gold and stuff, and people were worshiping false gods. And Moses got mad, and he threw those tablets written by the finger of God, and they broke. So in chapter 35, verse 29, Moses goes back up to the mountain, and he was up there for 40 days and 40 nights. And then in verse 29, it says, I take that back. I wrote down the wrong note. Stand by, let me find it. Sorry, right book, wrong chapter. In chapter 34, verse 29, and it came to pass when Moses came down from Mount Sinai, and he was up there for 40 days and 40 nights, with the 2 tables of testimony in Moses' hand, when he came down from the mount, that Moses wit not the skin of his face shone while he talked with him. There's a couple of different places that it talks about where Moses wrote the second tablets. In verse 27, and the Lord said unto Moses, write thou these words, for after the tenor of these words I have made a covenant with thee and with Israel. And so I believe because of that Moses wrote the words on the tablets, the second words, even though in earlier in chapter 34, and the Lord said unto Moses, hew the 2 tables of stone like unto the first, and I will write upon these tables the words that were in the first tables, which thou breakest. But because in this verse it says, and the Lord said unto Moses, write thou these words, for after tenor of these words I have made a covenant with thee and with Israel. And it says, and it came to pass when Moses came down from the Mount Sinai with the 2 tables of testimony in Moses' hand. Well, let's say you don't believe what I just said, and that is fine. The Bible is written in a way that people interpret it differently. Like I said, I study with Pastor Murray's, and this next subject I'm going to be covering Noahs Ark. And when I was studying with them, I'm like, man, that's not right. The Murrays will tell you, don't believe me, this man, or anybody else. Get out the Bible and read it for yourself. And like I said, unless you're paying attention to what you're reading, you're going to refer back to what you were taught all your life. So when I would go and read this section in Genesis on Noah's Ark, every movie that you watch, well, I take that back, almost every movie that you watch, there's another movie out there that it's kind of weird. But all the Christian movies that you watch and all the children's books that you read and all that you've been taught all your life, they say and you believe that Noah only brought 2 of every animal onto the ark, and that's not true. And when I first started studying this, I got mad because I was taught something differently all my life. Here a few years ago, I was at the VA in St. Louis with my dad. He had a TERP operation, and I was in the waiting room sitting, and there was a nice black lady sitting next to me, and her and I were talking about different subjects. And one of the subjects was the Bible, and what I'm fixing to tell you. And I told her, because of the book by Harry Lorayne, How to Develop a Super Powerful Memory, you have to pay attention to what you're reading. And so I told her, in the Bible, initially, God commands Noah to bring 2 of every flesh onto the ark, both male and female. Later, he tells Noah to bring 7 of every clean animal onto the ark, both male and female, and 2 of every unclean animal onto the ark, both male and female. And the Bible discusses clean and unclean animals. An unclean animal is a scavenger, such as a vulture, and it discusses fish that are unclean animals, and it talks about the health food law. It doesn't say that you're going to go to hell if you eat a catfish, which, by the way, is an unclean animal. It just means that if you stay away from the unclean animals, that you will be healthier. And so, anyway, her and I were discussing this, and I told her, I said, most of the black people believe that their race came when Noah cursed his son for sleeping with his wife. Noah was just a man. He had no power whatsoever to change somebody's race, and other people believe that Noah's wife was African American descent. She was from that country. I'm from Missouri. Some people call me Missourian. I wasn't born here. I was born in New Mexico. So just because you're living in a place doesn't mean that you or was born in that place. Or anyway, when I was telling her this, there was a guy sitting across from me, sitting next to my dad, and he's like, "You're wrong." And so because of the world that we live in today, there's not Bibles in waiting rooms of hospitals, or most hospitals. So I went searching for a Bible, and the maintenance man loaned me a Bible. And I read what I'm fixing to read to you. Genesis chapter 6, along about verse 18. But with thee I will establish my covenant, and thou shalt come unto the ark, thou and thy sons, and thy wife, and thy sons' wives, and thee. And of everything of all flesh, 2 of every sort shall thou bring unto the ark, to keep them alive with thee. They shall be male and female. Of fowls after their kind, of cattle after their kind, of every creeping thing on earth after his kind. 2 of every sort shall come unto thee, to keep them alive and take them food. So people take for granted, because of that, what I just read to you, 2 of every animal come onto the ark. That's not true. If you look at chapter 7, verse 2, and the Lord, let's go with verse 1. And the Lord said unto Noah, Come thou and all thy house unto the ark, for thee I have righteous before me in this generation. Verse 2, of every clean beast thou shalt take to thee by sevens, the male and the female, and of beasts that are not clean by 2, the male and the female. So let's get back to the original chapter 6, verse 19. Of every living thing of all flesh, 2 of every sort thou shalt bring unto the ark, to keep them with thee. They shall be male and female. My beliefs: in the 6th day, God created both man and woman of all races. And people are going to tell you, or tell me, or going to complain, well, the Bible says that there were only 8 Adamic souls onto the ark. And I'm not disputing that. There were. God told Noah that he was upset with what the world was coming. He thought about destroying it, but instead he brought Noah, his wife, their 3 sons, that makes 5, and their 3 sons' wives, that makes 8. That means 8 Christians were brought onto the ark. 8 people that God found pleasing. But he brought 2 of every flesh, both male and female. In other words, 2 black people, or Africa's black in color, 2 males and 2 females. So that makes 4 of that race. And I could tell you why. I'll go ahead and say it. God is against abomination where sister sleeps with father, father sleeps with daughter, sister sleeps with brother, etc., etc., etc. So with you having 2 black males and 2 black females, and then all the other races, over time, you're not sleeping with your distant relatives. So, so what do you say? Well, Mark, why are you saying that he brought 2 males and 2 females when it says he brought 2 of every flesh? Because down here where he says, I want you to bring 7 of every clean animal, both male and female, are you saying that he brought 6 females and 1 male? I don't believe that. I believe he brought 7 males and 7 females of that specific animal, clean animal, and then 2 of every unclean animal, both male and female. Again, for example, a vulture. He brought 2 males of that specific vulture and 2 females of that specific vulture. Anyway, I felt compelled to make this video and to discuss these 2 subjects. I could discuss more subjects. if you want me to, please leave me comments. Please tell me what you think. And, you know, I do want to talk about this Bible just a little bit. In the back of this Bible, it talks about the history of Bibles. And the Apocrypha, okay? In the original Bibles, the Apocrypha was contained. And then the original King James Version, and this Bible tells you the history, and I'm not going to read it all to you, but the original King James Version, it had the Apocrypha in that Bible. And then the second King James Version Bible came out, and the scholars, etc., asked, should we add the Apocrypha? And they decided to take it out. They said it was good reading material, but it didn't belong in the Bible. Well, in the very back of the Bible, Book of Revelations, chapter 22, verse 18, for I testify unto every man that heareth the words of prophecy of this book. If any man shall add unto these things, God shall add unto him the plagues that are written in this book. And if any man shall take away from the words of this book of this prophecy, God shall take away his part out of the book of life and out of the holy city from the things which are written in this book. Should they have taken the Apocrypha out of the Bible? I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there. I watched a documentary several years ago. During the wintertime, I didn't have heat in my house, and I would stay with my parents. And I was watching a documentary on the how the Bible was written. And in this documentary, it said, when it came to the very last book of the Bible, they were undecided on which book it would be. And they were contemplating another book, and I think it had to do with the book of the Apocrypha, and they chose to go with the book of Revelations. How true that is, I don't know, because man will tell you what he thinks you want to know. He will tell you things that will make the devil happy. And the devil knows his Bible like the back of his hand, but he twists the words around. And like when Jesus was tempted by the devil, he was quoting scriptures, but he was quoting them differently. Anyway, I just felt compelled to do this video. Don't take my word for it. Study the Bible yourself. Read it chapter by chapter, verse by verse. And if you're going somewhere and they're not teaching the Bible chapter by chapter and verse by verse, you might want to question whether you want to stay there. Give you one last quick story. When I was stationed in Blytheville, Arkansas, I had a coworker. His name was Stanley Thomas. Stanley Thomas just happened to be a black. We were really good friends, really good coworkers, and Stanley was a really good Christian. He later got out of the military to become a preacher, but he would ask me all the time, so Mark, you want to go to church with me? You want to go to church with me? And I was newly married, and one day I told Stanley, Stanley, I'm not racist. He's like, yeah, I know, Mark. I'm like, but my wife is extremely bashful, And if we walked into a church and we're the only white people in that church, she would be embarrassed. And he's like, Mark, white people come to church. Why don't you come to church with me? So we went. It was on a Wednesday night. We went to church, and it just so happens we're the only white people in the church, which is no big deal. The pastor took up like 6 or 7 offerings that night. And the very last offering, he's like, for anybody who has $5 in their pockets, we're raising money for this. And I forget what it was. And for the people who had $5 or more in their pockets, they would bring it up, and the pastor would shake their hands, bless them. They would shake the deacon's hands, and they would bless them. And, for the people who still could afford $5 after the 5 or 6 other offerings that was given that night. And then preacher goes on and says, for anybody who's got less than $5 who want to contribute, go ahead and bring that up. And so for those people who still had a few pennies or quarters or nickels or whatever, a couple of dollars, they brought that up. Preacher did not shake their hands, did not bless them. Deacons did not bless them or shake their hands. They just put the money in the tray, and they were basically went back to their seat. Jesus talks about an offering that was given once, and how people made fun of this lady who gave a half a penny or something like that. And they're like, is that all she's got? She could have gave more. And Jesus told them that is all the money in the world that she had. But these people who gave an offering before them, they were extremely rich, and they barely gave any offering. And so Jesus says to his disciples when he told them to go out to preach, do not take anything with you. And if you go to someplace and you give the word out, and they get mad at you, to dust your clothes off and walk on. Do not be beggars. And so, for the reason I say this, the church that I went to when I was in Blytheville, Arkansas, with them taking 5 or 6, 7 offerings that night, they were beggars of money, and not the Word of God. They did not preach the Word of God. They were more interested in filling their purse with coin. So anyway, I'll get off my subject of the Bible. Leave me some comments, and may God bless each and every one of you.